So the rules are just your rules. They're my rules. Or her rules. Or the parents' rules. Or the government's. But it's all me. I make the rules. It can be just be glaringly obvious that life, this, doesn't have any rules. Doesn't need any rules. There's no authority. Life is not an authority. This, the word I use all the time, this, is not an authority. In a very real way, life doesn't care. And that's not that life is non-caring, uncaring. It's no caring or not caring. There's no recognition of you. You know how much you've wanted to be recognized, I'm guessing. I did. I wanted to be seen, to be known. So my best bet with that was to try and be known by another. To be seen by you. I long to be seen by you. That's really what love's longing is for self. Is this? It's insatiable, and the reason it's futile, and hence it's insatiable because it's not possible. There's nothing to see. I can't see you. You can't see me. And yet, how much effort do we as human beings put into that? To be known. To be seen. To be acknowledged. So the peace and the rest is, a lot of it is rest from that, peace from that, constant longing, need, desire to be seen by another and to see another, to see the other. And it doesn't have to be, it could be on a personal level, to be known by another human being. Particularly if you've deluded yourself by falling in love with another and self-deludes itself that when I've fallen in love, then I do know the other. There is a sense of this connection, this oneness, this completion that falling in love brings. But the truth is, you never know another. You can't. There's no knowing yourself. And without, if it's very obvious that there's no self to know, there is no other to know. And there's massive relief in that. And of course, with that longing can come the desire to not just know another human being or other human beings, other selves, but to know the almighty other, the absolute other, to know God. But without yourself, there can be no God. Because without that longing to know God, to become one with God, which comes from my sense of separation, comes from me, without that, there is no great other. There is no other than this. That is the wholeness and the completeness. It's outrageously simple. And then the question comes, so what is there in its place? What is in the place of all of that longing, all of that that need to be known, need to be seen, need for connection? There's nothing in its place. And so here in the story, when there was the absence of that, everything seemed overwhelmingly empty. Because without that, because life was filled with me. My fears, my needs, my desires, my hopes, my fears. All of it. And without it, without all of that, there's a overwhelming emptiness. This is essentially empty. And in comparison to that incredibly full life that was my life, the emptiness can feel overwhelming, disconcerting, can feel terrifying. And each human being who talks about it will speak about it in a unique way. We can't not. But the emptiness is universal of every human being who's seemingly has lost this sense of separation. Emptiness is there. It's probably the only thing that is always undeniable. And often, if you've had glimpses, I'm guessing they included some emptiness. You may have called it spaciousness or peace or stillness or silence. And I guess it can sound like, okay, so I know emptiness, you probably don't. Or you say to yourself, but that's not the case. It is the everything, the fullness that is empty. It is the everything, the happening that is nothing happening. Everything is empty. Everything is not, as well as is. Now, and again, it can sound like, well, how do I know that? It's really obvious you can't know that. I don't know that. And yet it's undeniable. And I think maybe this is a pathetic attempt at an explanation of why the emptiness is so obvious, is because the emptiness is empty of knowing, of understanding, of meaning, of purpose. It's utterly neutral. And neutrality is just incredibly empty. It's not one or the other. It's neither one or the other. And from my perspective, from self's perspective, everything always has to be. I need to know. If it's not one or the other, I can't know, can I? So it's always nagging at me. You know, you may hear this message, but me will always wants to argue with it. It has to be one or the other. It can't be both. You can't have your cake and eat it. You know, it can't be the absolute and relative, this. There can't be duality and non-duality. There can't be things and nothing. Which is it? That's the energy of self, is that. Because if it isn't, if I can't pin it down, I can't know the truth. If I can't know the truth, I can't know reality. If I can't know reality, how the fuck am I going to manage this? And that's all that the energy of self is around. This needs managing. This needs controlling. This needs me. Without me, what would there be? So self has made itself absolutely essential for life to be as it is. That's the lie. That's the delusion that self lives in. That I am. Because it's unthinkable to self that it's unthinkable that I'm non-existent. But even 1 or 2 steps down from that I don't really matter, that, this would be fine without me. And by this, I mean this, as well as this. This would be fine. This that I've called me would be fine without me. Well, me won't have it. It's not that it won't have it, really can't. I can only imagine a life for me. And so then me imagines what would life be without me, an imagined life that me imagines I would be aware of when I'm not there. I think I spent a lot of time doing that, imagining my life without me. What would that be like? I get that was quite a fantasy. I mean, there's a non-dual fantasy, isn't there? Watching YouTube into the early hours, night after night, imagining, okay, when I wake up in the morning, I won't be there, and it'll all be okay.
I remember many years ago when I was really deep into self-development, and I was always unsatisfied. And I made some work where you put out goals in the future,
Mm-hmm.
and half a year after which I checked these goals, and I was so unsatisfied. I reached all of them.
Yeah.
But the dissatisfaction continued, because that's how he works.
Absolutely. Well, there is no satisfaction in achieving a goal. All self does is create a new goal immediately. Because what would I be without one? So, some people say that there can be fleeting elation in achieving a goal. For top sportsmen, when you hear them interviewed and they've got the gold medal and they've worked their whole life and they thank everybody. And do you know what's very common after the Olympics for the gold medalists? Despair. That's what it's brought them, achieving their goal. What the fuck am I going to do now? I've done it. That's all my life was just getting there. And of course, it's okay if you've got a bronze or a silver, because you've still got the gold to get. So they're okay. They're all fine. But the gold medalist is screwed. And then they go, no, next Olympics, 2 golds. And then they're okay again. But if it's their last Olympic, the older athletes can be it's just desperate. And of course, that's seemingly at a high level. It's the same for everyone, that goal setting. And I taught that because I taught sports studies to 17, 18-year-olds to A-level. And one of the key things in sport is goal setting, because that helps you achieve it, of course. You can really only achieve. Self says you have to set the goal, otherwise how will you know where you're going to get to? And goal setting is a massive thing. And I would teach various strategies and methods in order, once you've set the goals, and you'd have a progressive pathway. Stairway to heaven kind of idea, isn't it? And if you go into the self-improvement section in the bookshop, it's literally thousands of books. There's hundreds come out each year, as though it's not been done to death. New book on self-improvement will always sell, even though it's exactly the same as every other one. So the end of self-improvement is worth talking about, because there's no self to improve. There's no fun in that. There's no joy in self-improvement. Self-improvement just says, not good enough, not there yet, incomplete. And if everyone I've ever spoken to, if they're honest with me, the core sense of being me is not enough, not good enough. That's really what me is a sense of, there must be more, I must be more than this. Or less. You know, I must get rid of at least some of my faults. My parents have pointed them out to me. My teachers have pointed them out to me. My partner now points them out to me. My children point them out to me. There's a lot of work still needs to be done to become good enough. And regardless of what all the others have pointed out, your failings, your weaknesses, where you might improve, they all pale into insignificance to what you say to yourself about your failings, your misdemeanors, your shortcomings, your shadow self. Oh, that spooky shadow self you've been hiding in the dark corners. There's no one in the dark corners. There's no one in the light. There's no one hiding in the dark. There isn't a shadow self. There are conversations, seemingly, you know, with between. It always reminds me of Tom and Jerry. You remember Tom and Jerry? And you'd have the angel on one shoulder and Satan on the other. I always liked that as a child. Thought, oh yeah, I know that. I know those conversations. Go on, do it. You know you want to. No, do as your mother says. You know it's wrong. Be a good mouse.
Maybe this is a technical question. Maybe first, is self something that comes sort of grabbing onto whatever happens? Does it come after what happens and trying to...
It's hard to put it in a time frame,
right?
You know, before and after.
But
it is a grabbing
yeah.
is.
If this body wants to ask questions about the nature of self, where that then seems that self would ask those questions.
Yeah, definitely.
But how can self do anything? I mean, because it's not there.
Oh, self is never doing. There's no self doing. But that doesn't mean that it's not a very convincing sense. There isn't
something happened.
a sense of being the doer, you know, so that when really all that self is the sense of the I am. The sense of I am is the sense of, you know, it's cliched, but the doership, the doer of being. So whatever this body does, there is someone, there is a one, and that is me, who is making it happen. As opposed to that's you, you're making that happen. So it's really a sense of responsibility, a sense of ownership, a sense of power. But at the core of that at the core of this sense of being powerful is a tiny little me, 2 years old. And of course, who doesn't feel powerful? So this sense of wanting power, wanting to be in control, controlling life, controlling my life. At the core of that is a very vulnerable, tiny, scared, little toddler self. And for most selves, while things are going their way, it's okay. When life clearly shows you, shows me, shows self, that regardless of all my best efforts to manage my life, to keep the balls in the air, to juggle life and manage it, regardless of that, life shows you very clearly it's all for nothing. Shows you you're never in control. That's really what trauma is. It seems obvious now that traumatic events are ones that show self that it was never in control. In endless, I mean, an accident is the most obvious one. And for self, reverts back to that terrified little self, that vulnerable little one who was at the mercy of all those giants. And I don't know about you, but I periodically throughout my life, I would have the experience of being a tiny little person in a world of giant adults. Am I the only child here in this? And they all seem to know what's going on. I haven't got a clue. I don't know what's going on, but I'll pretend. I won't tell anyone else, because the vulnerability of actually what this does, the whole of non-duality, it makes self feel very, very vulnerable. Those who are drawn to it, they're very few, but those who are, it's always going to be against my will, against your will, because it clearly states from the outset that there's nothing in it for you and that you're non-existent. That is, no matter how or why, there's no answers to those questions, that the human being is drawn to it, that you've been drawn to it. There's self going, what the fuck do you think you're playing at? Because immediately there's this sense of being, this small, vulnerable little self feels terribly threatened. Look how hard I've worked to hold it all together. And you want to throw all that away. And I don't know if you did this, but a lot of my conversation with myself, it was us, it was our. You know, there isn't one me, isn't there? What a lie that is, this idea that there is a self. Self is so many selves. How would you have a conversation with yourself? And it's often when you have a conversation with yourself, it's not just you and another self, is it? There's 3 or 4 of you in there. You know, just when you think you might have sorted it out between 2 aspects of yourself, there's another one joins in. Another voice. Usually it's mother and father, but mother self, father self. Good parent, supportive parent, chastising parent, scary parent. I laugh, it's dreadful.
I have a question regarding that.
Yeah, go
I
on.
was at a job interview a while back. Part of that job interview was to take a personality test. And I used to be really interested in them a few years back, and then I took this and I just couldn't answer anything. It was this multiple choice thing,
Yeah.
4 answers. And I was just, it could be any one of them.
Yeah.
And I was just, I felt like a bit schizophrenic. When
Oh.
I got to the job interview, and now we've looked at your results, and it looks like you're a very aggressive.
I felt sure you were going to say schizophrenic. They didn't. At least you were only aggressive.
Yeah. They didn't say mentally ill, but I don't know. And I used to be very interested in them, and now I just think it's.
Yeah, me too.
If it's, do you have anything?
Yeah, it's all nonsense. It's nonsense.
Is it? I mean, because there is a character, right?
Oh well, no. There isn't a character, because a character would just be another word for me, wouldn't it? A character. There are characteristics, though, which seem to appear, which we could then say, oh, that's the character. Typically, he does that in that situation. We don't have any more than that.
But shouldn't you be able to kind of know your own traits or characteristics and answer the right?
Should you?
Right?
You definitely shouldn't be able to, but you can try if you want to. That can be trying. I spent 30 years trying to know myself. Most of you have, haven't you? What did you really try and do? You really tried to know yourself, didn't you? I remember the first time I heard this message in any sort of form. I can't even remember who it was or what it was, but it was written down. It was in a book. And there was immediate resonance, you could say. Immediately it was like, oh, shit, no self. It was this, somebody had actually written and dared to say, which is the ultimate taboo. Come on, it is. You say to most of your friends, you can speak about sexual deviance, you can speak about, loving violence. You can speak about quite a few taboo things now, but you can't really speak about you don't exist. You can't. Self is just too, like you've just gone too far now. I can take most of it. And then, I read that self was illusory. This that I'd worked on, I'd loved, I'd spent most of my time working on, isn't. There was immediate, and I remember, and that there was a long time before I started following, studying, seeing who else spoke about this, looking at the traditions, becoming a student, you could say. But that stayed with me. And of course it resonated with awakening glimpse experiences. And I'd already said to myself, when I was running, my main motivation was for going running. I'd trained for half marathons when I was young and fit. And my main motivation was what I found out in psychology, in sports psychology, they call being in the flow or in the zone. This flow state, this zone state. And I knew it. And it was like, oh, yeah, I know exactly. And because that's what motivates me to get up in the morning and go for a run before work. Not to be fitter, not to be faster, not for any achievement, but for the for the hope that I might experience that again. And the simple way I'd describe it is there was just running, no one running. And that's how this is. So it's just simply, that's how this is. It wasn't anything special. Turns out, this is always, this is the zone, this is the flow, this is how this is. Of course it is, there isn't anything else. But I'm too busy, generally. And of course there isn't anything to notice. So I talk about that as an experience because it's the only way that we can talk about it. But it wasn't, it was just running. And that is how I describe it. Not me running, just running. That's how this is. So how is this? It's just sitting. There's no knowing in it. Sort of like your point, then you could say the knowing is always added on. It's an addition. And that seems to mask that which can't be seen, which is nothing, the emptiness, the not happening. While I say I know what's happening, there's a conviction that I at least have some control over what's happening, that seems to be the mask of, or the veil, traditionally you'd say it's veiled by knowing. And it's knowing that's illusory. No one knows. And it is wonderful that no one knows. No more questions.
You don't mean that.
Pardon?
You don't mean that.
No, not if there's silence. If there's a long pause, then ask some questions. No, there can be questions, but questions don't matter. So questions are fun. But I mean, questions aren't fun to me, are they? Fucking serious. Life's serious. It's my life, for God's sake. It's a matter of life and death. And the answering my questions can feel like that's how it can feel to me. The desperation for an answer can feel a matter of life or death. But if this is life and death, no more questions. Because most questions that me has are about death, really. The really important ones, the ones that create all the fear. Because Because self has convinced itself that it knows what this is, knows what's happening. I know what's going on. That's okay. But death, I don't know. That great unknown. That terrifying abyss. And the wonder is that the darkness is nothing to fear. Not knowing is nothing to fear. It's nothing.
Can you talk about the location?
Location?
Yeah. You said spaciousness.
Do you mean how it feels to be self-located?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, because they could be like watching,
Mm-hmm.
like smelling, like all the senses.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the sense that there is a location in that, knowing in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't know how it is for other human beings, but really the absence of the sense of being located, that I know where I am, you could say that's the difference. That's how life is different without me, because the sense of me is I know where I am. If I ask you to point to yourself now, I used to do it with kids at school actually. This was not in a non-dual way, but when we were doing psychology. So I'd say point to yourself. And this is quite interesting. I think it is. I used to think it was very interesting. All the girls would point to their solar plexus. Some of the boys would also do that. And a lot of the boys would do that. So just masculine location, the sense of where I'm located. A lot of the boys have the sense of location behind the eyes, in the head, intellectual, that head self. And then most of the girls, by the way, some of the girls would point to the head as well, but virtually all of them would point to the heart or, what chakra is it? Who studied their chakras? Who has? Which one is it? This one. Heart? Yeah. It's kind of what you'd expect. But that's not relevant, really. It's the fact that I'm inside. That's it, really. So where am I? I'm inside. I'm inside.
Yeah.
Where's everything else? Outside. There. That's what we're speaking of. That's separation. That's duality. That's the illusion. That there is someone inside who is separate from everyone else and everything else. Interesting in the location thing, I used to do this in therapy, personal space in all social. If you've done any social work, any human job, then personal space is a thing. So I also then take a bit of the air around the body that I own as mine too. You fucking come in that, I'm likely to kill you. Because it's mine, it's precious to me, this space, because I've taken ownership of that as well. So I would say, that's normal location. I'm here, you're there. Everything else is there. So there's here, which is me. And there's there, which is everything else. That's not how it is. That is how most human beings experience it. Because there is this sense of being inside. Now, I hear other speakers speak about it, but I would say that's the big, and it's really not noticeable. So without a sense of location, there isn't a no sense of location. It's this is where it gets tricky, just because all I can imagine, all self can imagine, is some wondrous, expanded self becoming everything. You know, that's a spiritual idea. It's not, it's beyond ordinary. There just isn't any location in, I don't know. So what I'm saying is here, there's no knowing of here from there. That's really, but the absence of knowing here from there, from knowing inside from outside, isn't even noticeable. If your sense of being inside, which is you, doesn't appear, you won't notice. Fucking talk about disappointing. I know you're hoping it's going to be really grand. I shouldn't laugh because it's wicked, but it is funny because I had such grandiose ideas of enlightenment and liberation, and I don't know. Because I'd heard that self is a contracted energy in the body, and then there can be an expansion. Well, this expansion sounded so out of this worldly wonderful. That's what I was expecting. Well, as I said yesterday, I think you'll be waiting a long time for that, I think. I mean, there's that sense of I will expand and become everything. No, there's no you to become everything. This is the greatest disappointment that you could ever have. Because there's nothing in it for you. You may have said that, you know, you've wanted the absence of yourself, because it's very clear that self is the root of most of your suffering, is the problem. But you've also probably bought into some grandiose idea of what enlightenment, liberation, awakening would appear like. Well, it doesn't appear like anything. It just appears as it is. That is a disappointment for the memory of the one who wanted it to be special. This is the end of the possibility of special. And you could listen, if I listen to others' awakening experiences, which people do want to tell you, by the way, you speak about this, everyone wants to tell you their awakening experiences. If you've got friends, they will bore you to death with their awakening experiences. This is not an awakening experience. This is not awakening. There is no one to awaken. It's disappointing, isn't it? I want to disappoint you all. I do. Or at least, you know, prepare you for the great disappointment. And no, it's... But I say it's disappointment. Of course, it's the end of the... Without me, it's not disappointing. But it's funny. It's hard to really talk about. It's certainly not what I imagined at all. Because I imagined specialness. Because really all me ever wanted was to be special. And although it may look like speaking about this is in some way special, it doesn't feel like that at all. Not a bit. So I wrote a poem yesterday, I Never Was. I never will be. I am isn't. And someone would have written underneath, that's interesting. I always thought the great masters always said, I am is. And I wrote underneath, I went, but I'm no master. Because this no way, there isn't any sense of being an authority, a master. That's where I lived as me, especially as a teacher. Most teachers have a good dollop of grandiosity in order to be a teacher, you know. I'm an authority, aren't I? The funny thing about doing this is there's no sense of feeling like an authority at all, because there can be no authority. So there are no masters, even though I did kneel at Tony Parsons' feet the other week.
When we talk about this, it seems like sometimes we can use you and me as just referring to patterns. And sometimes it's like me is this identification as something, and it seems like this identification is what disappears.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about what's happening. But sometimes it's like me still exist in conversation, in experience. When we talk about it, it's like there's a fluent, maybe it's a limit of language, there's this fluent use of you and me, but not referring to the identification.
Yeah.
And my brain trying to figure something out that maybe not need to be figured out, but it's still like I'm navigating, are we talking about using you and me because we need reference?
Yeah.
And that's the limit of language.
It is.
Or are we talking about what's disappearing, the identified me, the one that grabs the contraction, the energy, this. Because I've experienced myself when I become identified in this situation, when that happens, things seems much more important, but they're also definitely much more predictable because the pattern repeats. It's like if I just go down that avenue of typical family relations, situations, the outcome will end there.
Yeah.
And it nearly always happens. I can do the exact same word exchange, the exact same thing can happen, but if there's not identification, it can branch off at every moment to something else.
Yeah.
There's no like guarantee this pattern will go from A to D and everything is repeated. So there's like a freedom in not being identified.
Yeah.
But there's also like there's this strange observation of it that in my case.
Yeah, it can be anyway. I mean, we can't have conversations without referring to me and you. But me and you doesn't have to refer to me and you when we use me and you. Just empty. Just as you say, a point of reference. Otherwise, the funny thing is that without me being me, the word me doesn't have any weight if it's not me. So there's liberation to use dualistic language. It doesn't. There's no problem with it. Which, when I was a seeker, and I've met people. You probably met people in non-duality circles who will insist on using body-mind or something similar. Well, it seems contrived. I don't speak like that because there's no sense of needing to speak in that way. You don't have to negate the language without the sense of, if I refer to me, I'm not referring to what most me's would refer to as me. I'm talking about this human being and the memories and the experiences and how it happens. What's remembered, really. But without that identification, me is liberated, you could say. The word, dualistic language, is liberated, is free. It doesn't mean anything. And of course, that's very different from when it really does mean something. Because I am the center of the universe and everything revolves around me. But when me is just just an empty word, like all words are, then there's freedom to speak in normal. So, I've been criticised for that. I've heard people saying, "Well, you're always talking about me. You say there is no me, and then most of the time, all you talk about is yourself." I went, well, yeah, it's true because unless you talk about what the experience of being, what it is like to be identified as me, as separate, there's very little to talk about. There's nothing to talk about with non-duality. So most of the time in meetings, I'm talking about what isn't, which is me. I'm talking about the illusion, because there's plenty to say about me, but there's very little, there's really nothing to say about this. I mean, you could just have a meeting and you go, this is as it is. Full stop, done, go home, fuck off. The rest of it is waffly bullshit and maybe some entertainment or not. But that's it. So unless there's talking about the illusion of self, there's nothing to be said about this. Or you just keep repeating paradoxical statements and you get bored with saying the same paradoxical statements, so you try and come up with new ones. Hence I came up with, in one meeting I happened to mention this deafening silence. We spoke about it last night. I said, it's of no significance because people want to know what this deafening silence is. I've titled a book that, and I've titled my website, so it must be important. It's beautiful when words don't mean what they used to mean, the significance, the importance, the relevance. Nothing is relevant. That's wonderful? But dreadful for me, for self, is what self fears, being irrelevant, or worse than irrelevant. Because if I'm irrelevant, and insignificant, which is how most selves feel, then I can work towards greater relevance, greater significance, more importance. I've got something to do. This leaves you with nothing to do. But the wonder is that doing happens. Doing happens. You don't. There's never anyone doing anything. Doing was always happening by itself. Because I say that I'm doing what I'm doing, and there's a real conviction in that, I need that to be true in order to exist, then there has to be someone, something else doing everything else that I'm not doing, because of my conviction that I'm doing me. So therefore, I'm absolutely, if I hold that conviction, there is this really powerfully convincing sense that I am doing this, then you have to be doing that. But you're only doing that. And then there's all the rest of the stuff that's going on. Someone's got to be doing that. I can't have it that there is no doing. Hence, the belief in God is still incredibly the most prevalent sense that, in terms of belief, and it doesn't have to be God. I mean, I just think in a lot of non-duality circles, God's just been replaced by consciousness. It's just a word for the same, really. Some source, some cause. This can't be causeless. It's unthinkable that this is causeless, because it doesn't leave you with any answer. And I hate not having an answer. I hate it, not being able to answer the questions. It can be obvious that life's not asking any questions, though. It's always me. I'm the questioner. A tree's not asking any questions. The rug isn't asking any questions. The flowers aren't asking any questions. There's nothing wrong with questions or answers. They don't mean anything. They only mean something to you. I am is obsessed with meaning. Because I fear meaninglessness. But there's nothing to fear. This is meaninglessness. And so there is a lot of peace in not minding whatever meaning any human being puts on life, adds to. Because one is not better than another. Whereas, of course, when my meaning is so important to me, I then have to defend it again. Meaning is belief. And it needs defending because it's part of my sense of who I am. That in some way self feels that meaning and belief is holding this together. It's not. There's nothing being held together. There aren't actually things, separate things that need some glue to hold, to keep it all in place. It is difficult for all the selves if this seemingly happens where the conviction in meaning and purpose and significance just no longer appears, just doesn't turn up, then you will almost certainly get called crazy by a lot of selves. Can't not, really, because to self, of course, it is crazy. Of course, because if it wasn't crazy, then the self who, that means that the self who hears it has actually heard it, then there would be terror. Because the whole structure of self is based on knowing. So self and knowing are not two illusions, they're the same illusion. Knowing that I know what I know. I know what I know. Not I think I know what I know, which is the truth. The truth for each human being is each human being thinks it knows what it knows. It's just a thought. When I was a boy, I'd have arguments with my, sort of like my step-grandfather, Uncle Jess, who was an old farmer. He was an old man, but he was so, he was very belligerent and was a terrible know-all. And I'd have a discussion with him, usually at the dinner table. With whatever topic it would be, it would end up with us disagreeing about the truth. And he would say, and I would say, so, Uncle Jess, is that what you think? And he'd go, no, I don't think, I know. There, right there is the essence of self. Thoughts are taken as knowledge, as a certainty, as a power, not just a random, abstract, meaningless, empty appearance, which a thought is.
Do you think people become less annoying if their self falls away?
Is that, you're hoping for that?
Yeah.
No. No. Annoyance is liberated.
Better company or something?
Without the desire to be right and to uphold your point of view, you could say less annoying, but I mean, you are annoyed by the human beings that are annoying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, you could. It's both, really, in a way, because there's less. There's no desire to argue, because there's nothing to defend and nothing to uphold. You know, and you can't help the opinions, no matter how stupid and ignorant they are.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, there's less annoyance, you could say. But then, the human beings that are naturally annoying to that human being will be more naturally annoying than before. So, it's kind of yes and no. So, there won't be any need to argue, but there will be a walking away or a trying to escape quite quickly from human beings that you find that are naturally annoying.
Yeah, but would they become less annoying if their self fell away? I mean, if they didn't have the...
I would guess not.
Okay.
Not if you found them annoying. Their characteristics, their mannerisms, their behaviour, the way in which they speak, I don't know. No, because the annoyance was never yours.
Yeah.
You know, naturally, you know when you're with someone and you think, I don't know why, and I've got no justification for this, but I fucking can't stand her. And then there's all this thought process of justifying. Okay, it's not rational. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, Just give her a chance, for God's sake. But you know immediately that she's going to, there's going to be this sense of annoyance. Yeah. More of that, because there's much less, if any at all, of the discussion about, okay, I shouldn't be feeling like this. It's not, there's no justification. You know how self wants to, I need to feel justified in how I feel about or what I'm doing. And why do I feel this way? Well, there's no knowing that. It's just feeling that way. And life is much easier without those conversations with yourself about why do I feel this way? Because self needs to have a reason, and then it can justify being annoyed. Oh, now I know, it's her political beliefs. She's really ignorant and doesn't understand. And of course, I hate all those. Whereas this annoyance is something that naturally. As for them falling away and becoming less annoying, what are the chances of that? Non-existent.
Send them a YouTube link with Master Tim.
I would say the people who have always found me annoying find me equally annoying now. I would say that. I have lost a lot of friends because of, oh yeah, he's crazy, or he's weird. He's not himself. I thought I knew him. I just don't know him anymore. He's changed. Oh, hasn't he changed? Have you seen Tim lately? He's changed, hasn't he? And of course, self needs to know, have the sense that I know who you are, to feel comfortable with you. Of course, no one ever knew you. That's quite shocking. If that can hit like a sledgehammer, I think, that you've never been known by another. I talked about it earlier, but that it can be stunningly undeniable that no one's ever known you, and no one could ever know you. No one will ever know you. So all of that quest, all of that hope and that longing cannot be fulfilled. That's one of the reasons I say this is definitely not what self has ever been looking for. Because self is always looking for fulfillment. And for most selves, fulfillment, it can come, I'm looking for self-fulfillment in myself, but I'm also looking for it in relationship, by knowing another and becoming some sort of communion, some sort of, I nearly said coming together, but it's a little bit suggestive. It's not possible. And there is a sadness with that. It's a sadness as a memory, really, that it's not forgotten that that's really what I was always wanting to be, become one with. And there is no one to become one with. There isn't even one. I mean, I don't talk about oneness because I don't have any sense that this is one. There is a sense of completion and wholeness, and onlyness is better, really. Only. Which is one, anyway. But oneness sounds like a thing, sounds too much like God, I guess. And there's no sense of this is one.
There's no sense of this as a thing.
As a thingness, no. As an ultimate, absolute thing. Which again can be what self has wanted to. And of course, there is disappointment again because I wanted to know it, and there is no knowing only this. There is only this. Knowing is always added. It's an illusory extra that I know. This is regardless of knowing or not knowing.
That's kind of language again, because the way I see how we work with language is we can only work with something.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be a thing, it has to be an object, and no matter what we do with language. And that's why you often land in negations, because you have to pull the blanket away under this conception of whatever conception it is, because there's a whole part of having a conception that is the problem, or that is.
It's true. Yeah, and traditionally, the traditional Advaita is all about negation, isn't it? Neti, neti, neti. And yet, you could say, in the end, there isn't an in the end, but in the end, nothing needed to be negated. And that's beautiful when there is no. So, seemingly, in order to destroy the convictions in knowing, there can seem to be a lot of negation, but there is nothing to be negated other than illusion, which is the illusion that this is true. I know this already. That seemingly has to be burnt, has to die. And then in the end, it's very obvious that nothing had been destroyed in the negation. There's nothing to be negated about this. And so in that sense, there's nothing to argue for or against.
In a way, it feels like us being here actually, now I speak for myself, maybe, that I'm not hearing what you're saying, because I listen and I still think that it's attractive what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that must mean that I'm hearing something different, because if I took you by word that I don't exist, there would be fear and I don't want to hear this. But
while there's a sense of attraction to this, it can still feel like something that could be achieved, attained.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
But then I also think that, because sometimes when people hear this, there is more reluctance to listening further. And then I think that they are probably more in nearer a state of collapse and actual hearing it.
Yeah, maybe in the story they are.
Right.
But none of that's true. Just a story. There's no one closer or further away, simply because there is no one. But yes, I could see how it would appear that way. Yeah, it could seem like that. And I could say that's how it was for me. I was a seeker for many years, and with more glimpses and feeling getting closer, and then quite a long period of gradually getting more despairing. More and more despair that I knew that I couldn't be getting closer because there was no one to get closer. And that became more and more undeniable. And then the sense of the one who might be able to get there screamed and shouted and I've tried so hard. I've been on this path all this time. How could that be? It couldn't be for nothing. And there doesn't have to be despair, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't. Because look how much work I've done, I says. How hard have I tried? All for nothing.
Yesterday you said in that process was also doubt, so it was sort of going back and forth in a way. So I've had glimpses,
Yeah.
or maybe I haven't, maybe I'm still here,
Yeah.
or am I not? When was the knowing that now it's all gone?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're waiting for, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So no one knows. But
No,
still there's a knowing.
No, and there's worse. I mean, the news is even worse than that, again, because you won't know when it's happened, because it won't have happened. I mean, how dreadful is that? That has got to be the shittiest bit of news you could ever hear. So you're waiting until you know that it's happened. And when it's happened, you won't be there. You won't know. There will be nothing revealed. It's dreadful. And yet hilarious, because of course there is no revelation. This is the revelation. This is all. This is completely everything. This is all of time. Self lives in a story of time. Well, there is only this, and so it's not only everything that is, it's everything that has been and could be. Because has been is memory, and I don't know, regrets and success and failure. All of your story. It's here. It's not somewhere else. It's happening. The past is happening. If it's happening, which is just the past appearing as, oh, I remember. That's what the past is. Oh, I see a picture. I remember. If it's happening, it's happening, but it's not somewhere else. There's nowhere else. So there's no other space. There's no other place. There's no other time. It is very destructive of whatever you've hoped for. That can't be. Other than as a hope. If hope is happening. That's all it is. There's a sadness to it. Yeah.
Does this sadness come from thought?
Say again?
Does this sadness come from thought?
Well, yeah, it could come with a thought, I guess. But there can just be, you must have experienced just sadness, and you go, I don't even know what I'm sad about. So thought tries to find the reason for sadness, and it can't be found. Self won't have that, so it will try and find a reason so I can put a label on it, and so I feel a bit more comfortable. Because if I know why I'm sad, then I can work to not be sad, which self always tries to do, because self makes sadness wrong.
Or indulge in it.
Yeah, it can wallow, but and can have pride in it, of course. Yeah,
I mean,
but
I spent a year in my youth, like 15 years, when I was 15 years old. I spent a year where I was sitting crying every night, listening to romantic music, and just indulging in it. But I didn't have a thought about it.
Wasn't it beautiful though?
It was very beautiful.
Yeah, you loved it. Yeah, everyone loves a sad song or a sad movie. Not everyone. Not a real man, you know. I know some macho men who, you know, who would shamefully have to admit that they cried at Lassie movies. Lassie Come Home. That's a tearjerker. But a lot of what self does is deny the obvious sadness of life. It's undeniable. And we're talking about. I know Andreas always said, you know, this is a lose-lose situation. I remember him saying that. I always liked that. It's a good line, because self lives in what I'm really. Self is always looking for a win-win. You know, if I can kill two birds with one stone, I want a win-win. This is lose, 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 lose. This is always being lost, as it is found. But the finding and the losing are not two. So this appears, this is found. You don't find it, this is found. But there is no space between the finding and the loss. So the finding itself is sad. And there's nothing to hold on to. You don't possess anything. It's worse than you don't possess anything. You never possessed anything. All of your life, just a story. That's all you have. All there is of you is a story. And you can tell that story. And you can believe. Self needs to believe it in order for me to be real and exist. The story must be real. And of course, with my past story, I then know where I am, because I know how I got here. And it's all real. And now I know where I am, I can then know where I'm going. Imagine I know where I'm going from here. So being me is hard work. Doing that constantly, which you don't know you're doing, but that's what self is doing, is creating all of that and making it real. Ah, shit, that's a lot of energy. It's a lot of effort. That we call normal. You know, it's normal, how human beings are.
So the effort over there is the same as my effort that this furniture is appearing. It feels very effortless for me that this room is appearing.
Yeah, you're not having to...
For myself to appear is, constant.
Yeah, well, there are things that self will accept that it doesn't have any part in, like that wall, unless I built it, you know, so it doesn't take any effort. But then, for me to upkeep me, to uphold the illusion of me, is constant effort. It takes all the energy. It takes everything. It's a job. Whereas this is not a job. This whatever words we try and talk about, what is being. Being is not a job. It's not a responsibility. I think there's a bit of a misconception around the whole notion of free will, or just choice, really, choosing, decision making, as though, you know, there is no free will. It's not that there's no free will, it's that there's no one who has free will. There isn't one who has free will. The appearance may include the appearance of choosing, making a decision, having options, and then seemingly opting for something. So it's not that there's not free will. There's no one who has free will. This is utterly free. But the whole idea of will is that there needs to be a willer. So I could say that there's no free will, but it's not really how it appears. The appearance may well be of freely choosing, because of course this is free. Everything freely appears. So free will may well freely appear as well as anything else. It's the willer, I don't think that's a word, it's the one who has free will. That's the illusion. So choices happen, choosing happens from the seeming choices. That's really no different whether there's a sense of being the chooser or not, other than, of course, there is the significance of the choices comes from the importance of it, the seriousness of the choices comes from them being my choices. And of course, I had a choice, so I could have chosen differently. That's the illusion. Choices are simply made whether there's a sense of you are making them or not. So you may have an idea of without me there will be no sense of free will, of choosing, of decisions being made. No, of course not. Everything happens naturally, for want of a better word. There's just no one doing that. So free will is no different from anything else that may or may not appear. And I know as a seeker in non-duality, this whole question of free will becomes it's like a big deal. It really isn't a big deal at all. So there's quite a lot of relief in that choice is just happening, same as anything else seeming to happen. There's no big deal. It's only a big deal because they're mine. Everything's only a big deal because it's mine. So, choosing, decision making is immeasurably lighter without me being the chooser, without my responsibility for making the right choice. There is no right choice. I could go as far as to say there is no choice in what is chosen. So the illusion is that you could have chosen otherwise. That's what self says. That's responsibility. That's the whole sense of what we normally, most selves would think of as free will, is that I chose that, but I could have chosen that. I went that way, I could have gone that way. No, you couldn't have gone that way. You actually didn't go away. There was no way. There was a seeming choice, that's it. And although there is no one to forgive, there can be a real sense of forgiveness for every human being and all the seeming choices that they've made. There can be a sense of forgiveness when it's obvious that they couldn't have chosen other. That's quite beautiful. That can feel like love. There's a real compassion and innocence in all those dreadful choices that others have made and that you have seemingly made. When no one made those choices. But remember, self loves berating itself for making a bad choice. Self loves that. That's empowering.
You talked about compassion.
Yeah.
Is compassion important?
No.
But the spiritual masters have been talking about compassion
Mm-hmm.
as the most important thing.
No, it's not important. No, nothing's important. But no. It's lovely, though. Beautiful. Lovely in the sense of its love. If love means anything, which it doesn't. But really, when I use the word compassion, I could easily use the word love instead. But no, there isn't a thing called compassion. There isn't a thing called love. But there can be because there really aren't feelings. And it's again a sense of innocence that everything that's done, even the most dreadful things, even the most dreadful decisions, choices, actions, if it's seen to be, it could not be other, if that's obvious and undeniable, and without the sense of me, that is undeniable. It can't be denied anymore. I like to deny it because then you could behave differently and I could behave differently. I could make better choices. I mean, that's the whole dilemma of me. And that's most suffering, is in that. And so without that, there is a really simple, obvious love and compassion for every human being. It simply could not be other than it seemingly is.
It reminds me of this saying from A Course in Miracles, where they state that forgiveness is the last illusion, because there's nothing to forgive. But how the hell will you ever get to the point of there is nothing to forgive without forgiveness?
Yeah, and the strange thing about I'm saying it's forgiveness. Of course, there doesn't need anyone to forgive for forgiveness to be apparent, to be appearing. There can be a sense of forgiveness. And really, it's not forgiveness, it's that it's another word, but there isn't a word. It's that there's nothing to forgive. There isn't a word for that. So the closest word is still forgiveness when every human being can only be as they are. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, that's the great compassion. There's no compassion in you could be other than you are, so work fucking harder. There is no compassion in that. You know, what traditionally in Western culture is often called tough love, isn't it? You know, I'm doing this for you. It's in your best interests that I treat you appallingly and blame you and ensure that you do feel guilty and responsible, because that's the only way you could improve. You may already have a really powerful sense that there's no love in that. That's not compassionate. It's conditional love. What self usually calls love is always conditional on you being a certain way. There's a freedom in the impossibility of, so in terms of making choices and this whole notion of free will, that there can't be a choice that's wrong. You can't make the wrong choice or the wrong decision. And the reason you can't make a wrong choice or a right choice is the reason you can't make a wrong choice is there's no right choice. Who would know the right choice? It's only you who say, in retrospect, that was a wrong choice. Because the illusion is that that choice led to that happening, this whole illusion of cause and effect. Self won't give that up, though. I mean, I'm utterly powerless if I can't affect cause and effect, if I don't have free will. It's really not the big deal that self makes it out to be, at all. Without me, you won't be bothered about free will. Yours or anyone else's. Everything is already free, but no one has it. Again, it just doesn't appear as a question anymore. It's not. Without the one to have free will, there's no question of or significance in the whole question of free will. It becomes redundant. That's really what I mean. It's a moot point. It just it doesn't matter. If a human being has a sense of they have free will, and that's how it is. If a human being there's no sense of having it, but it still may appear to happen, then that doesn't matter either. But self makes a big deal of it because I need it.
Yeah, of course.
What would I be without it? Powerless to begin with. And that's probably, that's my worst fear, one of my worst fears, not having freedom to choose my path, my destiny, my road, my journey, how important it is, how significant it is. I won't be giving that up easily. I'll hold on to that for as long as possible. I mean, it will go. When the body's in the ground, I'm guessing there's not a lot of free will left, but you can imagine stories. Most religions have stories about, oh no, still there'll be choices to be made. You still have some power and free will. And
That's where free will becomes funny, when it's like, oh, now you can choose with free will if you want to go to purgatory or not. Doesn't make sense.
yeah. Oh, you have the free will to repent, of course, as well, don't you? So in order to get... you have to repent of your sins. This is my Christian upbringing coming out, obviously. But you can freely repent. Unless you freely do that, then of course you can't be forgiven. But of course, there's no freedom to be freely repent or not. If repentance seemingly happens, that freely happens. If there's complete resistance to that, and I go, no, I was fucking right all along. Damn all the others. There's no choice in any of that. There's no choice in what choices are made. There's only how it seems to be. So if it seems to be ordered, I don't know what word you would use instead of the opposite of anarchy would be order, I guess. And self likes order and fears anarchy, apart from the very angry self who wants to smash the order. But then they want to replace it. Remember, anarchists don't really want anarchy. Anarchist selves don't want anarchy. They want anarchy to destroy the old order and to put in place a new order more to their liking. That's always, you look at revolutions which look like anarchy, which is just destroying the current order, seemingly, and then replacing it with some new rules, some new order. So really there's neither order nor anarchy, really. Anarchy is just a way of saying that what you think you know about how the universe works, how life works, are just stories comforting to self, and that now I know what's happening, how it happens, even why it happens if you've got some philosophical beliefs that you firmly hold on to, as they give me comfort that now I know. And if I use the word anarchy or wild, free, because freedom is really the closest word, because of course this is free to appear exactly how it is, anarchic, ordered. Seemingly understandable, seemingly completely unknowable.
Is there knowing in the unknowing?
Yeah, there's no knowing from unknowing.
I mean, if I look at that lamp, if I take the label off, I don't know what the fuck it is.
No. No, if I'm speaking about not knowing or unknowing, really I'm always referring to I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know what I know. Knowing appears, but I don't know I don't know why or how or what the knowing is. And really, most of what we call knowing is just a word, is objectification. That's all it is. And then from that, then it gets more complex. I know relationships between objects. So really, when I say I know, what self really means is I know the names for things, and then I know sentences about the relationships between things. And the relationship between things tells me how they came to be. I know the history of things. I know how things are made, how they came to be. And it's amazing how how childlike it can be really obvious how childlike that illusion of knowing is. I've just taken it and accepted it as truth. That words are the actual. And I'm not talking, when I say unknowing or not knowing, I'm not talking about losing any of that. None of the knowing is lost. It sounds like unknowing. I remember hearing it, all speakers who I used to go and see would speak about it, and I would go, but so unknowing must mean the absence of knowledge. No, it's that all knowledge is empty. That's the unknowing. So knowing appears, and there's no knowing how knowing appears or what it means. It's like all the weight of knowing, all the significance, all the reality of knowing is destroyed. But the knowing remains. as a story of knowing. That's what knowing is. Knowing what things are, where this is, what this is, how it came to be, what it's going to be. All stories, some very simplistic, some intellectually really elaborate, but really they're ultimately all the same. They're absolutely empty. So that's really what I mean by. Because if someone asks you, do you know? So they ask you a question. Let's just say a practical question, and you find the words which are the answer. Then you say, I know. They ask you another question. You look for the words. You don't have the words. You don't have the answer. I don't know. Is there any difference? No. There's no knowing from a not knowing. Just an illusion. I know this. I don't know that. Big fucking deal. Yes, to self it is a big deal. Because I admire those who know more than me, don't I? Because again, where is that energy of that need to know? It's from that 2-3-year-old child learning language, desiring to know. The more words I know, the wider my vocabulary, the more I know, the more, the bigger, safer, more solid, more real I feel in this terrifying world of giants. And the more I know, the safer I'll be. That's why when knowledge is seen as empty, it can be terrifying. I'll be surprised if it's not by chance that the void, emptiness, the abyss is all the stuff of horror movies for self. If you want to have a scary film, what do? You take the subject and you walk them down the stairs into the basement, into the dark. Immediately, the viewer goes, fucking hell, yeah, into the dark. Anything could happen. Anything. There's monsters in the dark. And there aren't any children who didn't fear monsters in the dark, any little small selves. Every child felt it. I felt it massively, really intensely. For some children who are burdened with a really vivid imagination is just as real as real, as we talked about yesterday. And I would have, I could conjure up all kinds of monsters in the dark and be absolutely terrified. So I slept with the light on till I was about 15. I wouldn't tell any of my mates because I was embarrassed. But yeah, really, even as an adult, as a young adult, it would still return that childhood memory of, the little tiny me would seemingly return to those, especially just waking from sleep. So I'd have a nightmare, so I'd have a night terror, and I'd wake up screaming. This is as an adult, and then there would be just the darkness, and then the monsters would be real in waking as well, even though I knew they weren't real. The sense of it. And really it's the fear of not knowing, and if I don't know, if I can't see, how can I keep myself safe? if I can't know what's out there because I can't see it, and one of the most wonderful things is that there really is no light and dark. You know, this doesn't make sense at all. But it feels right to say that there is the great duality is darkness and light. And really there isn't darkness and light. Light is darkness appearing light. Darkness is light appearing dark. They're not two. This appears dark, this appears light. This appears empty, this appears full. But not knowing is bliss. I mean, every self longs for sleep, the absence of itself, you know, to fall into nothing, to disappear. Ah, blissful rest, death, every night. And if you can't sleep, it's torture. Truly. So what's feared most by self is death or non-existence, and yet it happens every evening. There's nothing to fear. You love it. You long for it. And that is deep sleep is a complete non-knowing, isn't it? A complete unknowing, you could say. Whereas this is knowing and unknowing. You could say it that way.
Sometimes in the moment of falling asleep, when the body is tensing or letting out a sound, or the sensation of falling, is that literally the contraction, like leaving the body? Is that falling out and then?
I don't think I've ever had a sense of falling we use the phrase falling asleep, but my sensation of falling is in dreams. I mean, that's very common, the falling in dream, isn't it? But I don't...
I think I sometimes wake up of falling asleep and then waking up from the rip into sleep, you know.
Oh, okay, yeah. The sensation that I always used to get of falling asleep was sinking into the bed. Like really felt physically, like going into the mattress, like it just, like an embrace really, like the nothing embracing you, like being enfolded. I used to get that. I don't think it happens anymore. But interest in the significance of dreams, that dies. I mean, dreams are seen as just as insignificant as everything else. There won't be, the story that people love to tell about what dreams mean. Well, of course, if this means nothing, of course, dreams mean even fucking less. If you could get less than nothing. But yeah, so there's no significance in any of it, because significance is just, what does it mean for my real story? My real life, not my dream life, but my dream life can tell me and guide me in my waking life. Well, when there's no one having a dream life or a waking life, there's just dreams or awake.
Will you say something about coming home?
For most people, it seems, for most selves, it seems that part of the sense of me, of being me, is that I've somehow been, I've left home, or I'm away from home and I long to come home. This sense of longing to come home. Which is painful, and I think for a lot of self, that really is the fuel of the search, the fuel of seeking, is this longing to come home. I felt that. I wrote quite a bit about that when I was depressed. And depression is like an extreme isolation, you could say. So the sense of self is isolated, is separate, and then in depression it becomes amplified. There is only that sense. In a all-consuming, intense way. But there is only home. But there is no coming home. I mean, it's really quite tragic. This isn't an optimism. This isn't a story of possibility of coming home. This destroys that. But in the seeming destruction of the hope of coming home, there is only home. No one who could have possibly ever been away or to return. There is no leaving or returning. So there is no one at home. As my dad would say about someone who was stupid, the lights are on, but there's no one at home. Because really that's, so human beings are now seen as that. So all of you, I now see, the lights are on. But you won't see anyone at home anymore. So really, there is only home, is the freedom, is the rest, and the peace, is the rest from that journey to get home. When it's not possible to leave. There's no leaving here. There's nowhere else to go. And I will say, in the story, you can tell a story of it can sound like a return, so a return home. But I could never say that because there is no sense of coming back. There was no one to ever could possibly have left in order to return. But the sense of being at home, not I am at home, but just home, of course that is peace and rest, isn't it? If there's only home, no matter where you are, no matter how you feel, no matter what's happening, no matter what appears, it's all home. That's unconditional. It's all conditions. Despite, in spite of, regardless of conditions, regardless of seeming place, it's all home. So there was never you never left. There was never you to leave. You haven't been cast out. There was no one to be cast out of the garden. And so you can romanticize and say, this is paradise and Eden and perfection, and you hear spirituality is full of that stuff. But this is so far beyond any romantic idealization. It's so inclusive. It includes all the horror. includes all the pain. That's love. There would be no love. There's no possibility of anything feeling like love if it was only certain conditions, if there was home and away from home.
Do you think everyone have to go through this despair?
No, not at all. There is nothing to go through. But it just seems really likely that most souls will hang on for dear life because this feels like life or death. And it's what self doesn't want. No matter how much self says it does want it, it doesn't. I don't want nothing. And Tony always talked about absolute poverty. You know, it's not what self wants. To have nothing for myself. To seemingly lose everything that I've called mine. Everything that's precious. And really that's what is precious to me. What's precious to self is everything I call mine. And most precious of all is me. By far, much more precious than anything else. That's really a tough, because when it comes to it, that's really undeniable, that when it comes to it, whatever you've said you care about pales into insignificance compared with my own existence. Me. That's what I care about. This self-obsession, this self-absorption. You know, I'm totally self-centered. And self can be really aware that creates all the suffering. That can be really, undeniable. And yet, I still can't contemplate and I still can't accept. That's why I would never speak of acceptance or surrender or most of the spiritual paths, because it seems really obvious that here, that could never have worked. All it would have been is me being a surrendered me being an accepting me.
It's funny this because it's like this. If I ever is interested in something else at the moment, if something else grabs my interest, it very fast feels like something that just needs to be worn out. It's there, but it's like being grinded away.
Right.
At some stage, I can have not faking an interest. I can have a genuine interest, but it doesn't last.
No.
It's so short-lived compared to where I normally am. If a topic grabs me, I could go on with things for years, and now it's like, been there, done that, and like, but okay, it will be granted a little away. Okay, I'll see you. I will have a talk one evening with a guy, and then it's gone. It's like
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I like the word disillusionment. That's pretty close. You could describe this as total disillusionment. Absolute. That's not what you want. Self loves its illusions. That's where I live. That's where I exist. Self's very resistant to the destruction of illusion.
And there's nothing to be done.
It's
a waiting game, or how would you describe it?
Well, the waiting is the game. Me is the waiting. So it's not a waiting game because there's nothing to wait for. But me is the waiting game. There's nothing going to happen.
And nothing.
No, anything can be done.
Yeah.
No, it's not that nothing can be done.
So what can be done?
Anything. Just what appears to be being done. There aren't any rules. You know, this isn't saying that there's nothing to be done. It's saying whatever's being done is being done. That's all there is. But there isn't anything that is going to be done that could be done. That would just be imagination, wouldn't it? This doesn't make anything wrong. You know, it's not that, okay, so it can sound like, and I think when some people speak about this, there is a real flavour of, okay, there's something wrong with doing. Like there's something wrong with paths, there's something wrong with practice. And of course, there is nothing wrong with anything. But they won't be helpful. There's nothing to be helpful to arrive here, is there? How would anything help for this to be as it is? It just doesn't require any, this has no requirements. It's completely, the freedom and the love and the unconditional. When I talk about love, it's because this doesn't need anything. This has no need, no desire, no requirements at all. That's why you can speak of peace. Because of course, without any requirements or needs, there is peace. And this, because this is already, you know, requirements and needs are what has to be put in place in order for something else. Well, there isn't something else. So it doesn't matter what's done. What wonderful freedom is that? That it doesn't matter what's done. There is no doing that's better or worse. The only commentary on better and worse comes from you and me and him and her. Life's not commenting on better or worse, or right and wrong, or more useful, more bringing you closer or further away. Because there is some speak that practices, you know, if you did a spiritual practice, say, that's actually supporting self, which you could say, but then you could say that of anything. You know, it doesn't have to be a spiritual practice. Playing golf and trying to get a lower golf handicap would be the same, seemingly. But because there is no self to be reinforced or not, it's all irrelevant. It's all unconditional. That's love, you know. It doesn't matter. Isn't it wonderful that you can't get life right? No one's ever got life right or wrong.
And when we search, we always search for something we have heard about, read about. And who is the person who searched for something? You know, when you have a guru, he tells you if you do this, for example.
Yeah.
Then you will get in line.
Well, you can search for it, but a lot of seeking is you don't know what you're seeking for. Self doesn't know. I mean, most seeking, it's really amorphous. It just doesn't. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have a. So it's not that I'm seeking peace or I'm seeking home or I'm seeking. It just. There is just this energy of moving forward towards heaven, towards This isn't moving forward. There's no movement. This doesn't move. This is utterly still. So wonderfully, it doesn't matter what you do. Or anyone else. Doesn't matter what you feel. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter what you love. Doesn't matter what you hate. It only matters to you and the other yous. They'll tell you it matters. And you'll tell maybe yourself that it matters. That's all. That's what matters. And if just that is seen, there can be quite a lot of relief in that. Okay, it's just, I've said this matters. That's all. I say this is important. That's all that importance means. Or I say that's insignificant. That's all that insignificance means. That is no more insignificant than your sense of significance. It's all absolutely flat. It's all neutral until I say otherwise. Higher and lower, better and worse, good and bad, wrong and right. There's no one judging life but you. You are the judge, the jury, and the executioner. You are you're the arbiter of righteousness. And souls will fight to the death to uphold what they believe to be righteous. But that's all it means. It's wonderfully simple when there's no truth. There's no desire for truth. And it's perfectly okay to speak to others who say they know the truth. And you go, oh, that's nice. There's no desire to argue with someone's truth. Knowing that that's all that truth actually is their thoughts of their conviction in knowing. The same with reality. Really, reality and truth, they're just the same ideas that self has that I could know. There's great freedom in just whatever question you ever get asked from now on, you could say, I don't know. It's really beautiful. Or if you could say, you could give an answer, but you know you don't know that. It's really obvious that, an answer came, but it doesn't mean anything. And then when your truth and my truth and his truth and her truth are just what they are, ideas of knowing the truth, stories of knowing the truth, that's love there. That's unconditional because it doesn't matter. There's nothing to defend. There's nothing to argue for. You still dislike the same. So, and you know that's really beautiful as well. So you could say something, but this character just doesn't like that. And you go, oh, that's shit. You know, you tell me something that you know the truth, and I go, it could easily come out as, well, that's bullshit.
What if the police ask, did you do that? I don't know.
I go, of course, officer. What else would you like? A bribe? No, it doesn't. There's no knowing. The whole illusion is you know when the police officer stops you, how are you going to react? You have no idea. That's another great illusion of self, is that I know myself and I know in each situation how I would respond because I know myself. Bullshit.
But is there an element of unpredictability to it?
It's totally
Or
unpredictable.
is it like
It's
totally unpredictable?
Utterly.
Yeah.
In an unimaginable way. No, there's no predictability. None. The illusion of me is predictability. You haven't got any idea. You think you know what's happening now, and therefore, because you have this illusion that you know what the fuck is going on now, I can then know what's going to happen and feel some security in this. There is no security in this. This is anything can appear. We know this. That's what we call trauma. I thought I knew what was going to happen, and fucking hell, this shit happened.
Is it a constant surprise then?
Do you know, when it's all predictable, it's like there isn't any surprise. Oh, that's odd, isn't it? But yeah, no, it's the opposite of that. So it would be, there isn't, you could say it's constant surprise, and yet, because there isn't any anticipation of what will appear, it's more like the surprising isn't surprising. It's just what's appearing. In that way, you've heard speakers talk about the ordinariness of this, which again is the sort of antithesis of what me would want. I don't want ordinary. I want spectacular. I want special. I want wonderful. Don't give me ordinary. I know ordinary. I'm sick and tired of ordinary. Give me enlightenment, you know, choirs of angels kind of thing. But yeah, but there's no knowing whether choirs of angels will appear. They may well, but I wouldn't be surprised. Whereas you probably might be. I guess I would be surprised, choirs of angels. That's a bit extreme. But you know what I mean. So the one that thinks they have anticipated, thinks they know what's going to happen because they know what's happening. In a way, nothing is surprising. You could say it's all surprising, and so nothing is surprising if everything's surprising. Does that kind of make sense? I think that's... Because surprise means, really what surprise means to me is that I thought I knew what was going to happen. Then that happened. Wow, I didn't expect that. Because self lives in expectation of knowing what's to come. So in that sense, if everything is a surprise, everything is very ordinary. All the surprises are just what's happening.